what's old is now new. We got Vraska, Betrayal Sting, the new Planeswalker, which has been a Vanguard in this game already, but she's now out as a playable walker in the vault at the time of this recording. She is a mono black walker. She's got +8 on her mana bonuses, and I believe this is the highest mana gain in black in the game. Liliana, Untouched by Death, has a +7, so there's a little bit of a difference there. Let's talk about her abilities and what makes her unique and all that. First of all, she's got a passive ability. She's got Glistening Death. When a creature dies, that card gains the Phyrexianized emblem. When a Phyrexian creature enters the battlefield under your control, that creature gets +X/+X and gains Death Touch and First Strike until the beginning of your next turn. X is the number of creatures with Phyrexianized emblem in all graveyards. So this means we're going to be revolving around creatures dying when it comes to using her and getting the most out of her abilities. So there are going to be a few different ways of doing that. So let's talk about them. Her first ability, 9 loyalty, Oiled Incubation, draw 4 cards. Each creature card in your hand gains the Phyrexian subtype. So that's one way of getting creatures Phyrexianized. Creature cards in your hand gain X mana. X is the number of creatures with the Phyrexianized emblem in all graveyards. For me, the most useful part of this ability is that drawing 4 cards. That's a great ability to have in mono black, where there is a decent amount of card draw in black, but it usually comes at a cost. You usually have to, lose life to do it, destroy a creature or something of that sort. You usually have to sacrifice a little bit to get some card advantage there. So this just straight up gives you 4 cards, and that's a really good amount of cards, especially to start your turn with. The creature cards in your hand gaining X mana. In my playtesting, I haven't been able to really pump this up to a degree where it's really making a difference. Then again, you could try to do that, but the problem is it's just going to take a lot of creatures entering the battlefield and being destroyed, and it can be a little tricky, especially in standard right now. But if you want to go ahead and try and build for that, that could be fun. The creatures gaining the Phyrexian subtype is pretty nice because of the First Strike and Death Touch that it gets. So if you're using creatures that have or can gain Berserker, that usually makes them into these little assassins. There are some fun things you can do with this ability. Nothing too game-changing there, but it's a nice utility. Phyresis Touch. This is probably going to be the one you end up using the most. It's 11 loyalty. Destroy target creature, then create 6 gold tokens. That's great. Yeah, so you can destroy any creature on the battlefield, provided you can target it. So you don't necessarily have to destroy an opponent creature. You can destroy your own creature and gain 6 gold tokens out of it. So there's the possibility of getting a lot of mana out of doing that. So you're not only going to be able to destroy a nasty threat on your opponent's side, but you're also going to be getting possibly a lot of mana out of it. And then her third ability, for the Glory of Phyrexia, 20 loyalty, create 4 Phyrexian Embrace tokens. So it's a 4 shield token, and it stacks upon itself. So you're really getting a 16 shield token there. When this support enters the board, opposing creatures gain imminent death. So that's kind of nice. It's a countdown style of board wipe for creatures. At the beginning of your turn, exile the first creature with the Phyrexianized emblem from your opponent's graveyard. If you do, create a copy of that creature under your control. That copy gains the Phyrexian subtype. Then reinforce it X times. X is the number of creature with the Phyrexian emblem in all graveyards. So in my playtesting, I found that the creatures that come back to the board on my side tend to be in the reinforced once or twice range, sometimes 3, not usually more than that. It's kind of tough to really get this to an absurd amount, but it's just one of those things that I need to really play around with more and get some more out of it. there's a lot of fun things you can do with this Planeswalker if you have those abilities in mind. Here are a couple of decks that I've created for her. This one here is kind of just a basic all-around good mono black deck. It does have some of her abilities in mind. If you want to go with something like Portal to Phyrexia, it's kind of what her third ability does in a way. Opposing creatures gain imminent death. At the beginning of your turn, choose target player, pick one of the first 4 creature cards from the player's graveyard, return to battlefield under your control, and it gains the Phyrexian subtype. So, yeah, it makes your creatures into Phyrexians. So that synergizes with her passive ability. But for me, really, you don't want to necessarily rely on your opponent having great creatures. So what I did instead was just kind of put a lot of things into this deck that deal with my own graveyard. And you really need, with her mana gains being so flat in other colors, you really need to rely on creating black gems for you to match if you want to get off to a good start. So, of course, Cryptex, if you've been following me, you know that I'm a big fan of this card. At the beginning of your turn, convert 5 gems to one of the colors of your greatest mana bonuses. Black is by far her greatest mana bonus, so it's really going to be giving you 5 gems to black every turn. When support is destroyed, lose a reinforcement, draw a card. There's a little utility there, but it's really about the gem conversion. Leyline of the Guild pack, another one. Convert 6 gems to your Planeswalker's color. If you have both of these on the board, you're creating 11 black gems a turn, which is most likely going to be giving you a lot of gem conversion, cascades, lots of mana, and whatnot. So this one's kind of interesting. At the beginning of your turn, you may have target creature you control gain imminent death. If you do, pick one of the first 4 spell cards from your graveyard, exile that card, then create a copy of that card in your hand. It gains full mana. This is going to be great for Invoke Despair and Infinite Obliteration. These are going to be cards that will keep your opponent at bay as you get things going. Necromancy is a card I haven't really spotlit in any of my videos yet, but I really like this card. At the beginning of your turn, return the first creature with base power 9 or less from your graveyard to your battlefield with its reinforcements. My cards here, they're all base power 9 or less, so they're coming out every turn. So this is a good way to also bring back any creatures you may have lost, such as Angel of Suffering or anything that you put imminent death on already with Maestro's Ascendancy. At the end of your turn, you may destroy the top 2 cards of your library. If you do, reinforce each non-legendary creature you control. So that's going to be pumping up our Angel of Suffering and our Crawl Whip Cracker, which we'll just take a look at this really quickly. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy an opposing card at random. So this is a little bit wrongly worded. It really only destroys a creature, unfortunately. Would be great if it destroyed supports as well, but that's just not how this card works. Maybe they'll either make it so that it actually destroys any type of card in play, or they'll just reword it to say it only destroys creatures. But as of recording this, I don't know what their plans are. When this support is destroyed, destroy all creatures. So that's another thing. Sometimes that comes back to bite you, but a lot of times it's not something I worry about. It's got 4 shields as well, which is not bad. And then Shieldred, just an all-star card. When this creature enters the battlefield, destroy the first opposing non-token creature. At the beginning of your turn, mill 8. Exile all cards from your opponent's graveyard. Exile this card, then create a True Scriptures token. And then if you don't know what the True Scriptures token, destroy an opposing Vanguard support. If you can't, destroy target opposing creature. Your opponent discards 3 cards. Destroy the first 3 cards of your opponent's library. And then move all creature and support cards from all graveyards into play under your control. Return the first card named Shieldred from your exile to the battlefield under your control. So it usually takes a long time to get to a 3rd saga chapter, but when you do, it's worth the payoff, obviously. Very cool card and just helps with extra removal and getting things onto the battlefield. So I just kind of went with her because her abilities seem to revolve around grabbing your opponent's creatures and beating your opponent with them. And she's really good at that. And really good at taking her opponent's everything, really. Supports, creatures, you name it. Infinite Obliteration I like in today's current meta because a lot of the things that are the most annoying are GTA. If you don't know what that acronym is, Galta, Turtle, Atraxa. If they don't have them in their hand to play, they won't be doing much to you. So discard is actually a pretty solid counter to the meta right now. So you may, if you want to, add more cards into your decks that discard. So for now, I'm just using Infinite Obliteration, which is still one of the best cards that make your opponent discard in the game, and it will always be standard. And then Tyvar Jubilant Brawler for the haste, because you're going to be bringing creatures back to the battlefield under your control, and you're going to want them to make an impact as soon as they hit the battlefield. So giving them haste is going to make sure they at least do some damage before they are destroyed. So that is this deck, and I hope you enjoy watching it play out. This one's kind of a fun deck that has a lot of synergy going for it. So what's going on is I wanted to build around Persuasive Interrogators, 5/6 Gorgon Detective, 14 mana. When this card enters the battlefield, investigate. When a clue support you control is destroyed, create 2 Phyrexian Toxin tokens under your opponent's control. So there are a few things that are going to be creating some win cons. The Phyrexian Toxin tokens. So everything else in this deck is going to be helping pump up the toxins. We got Hand of the Praetors. When this creature deals combat damage to opposing creatures, that creature gets -X, -0. X is this creature's power. At the beginning of your turn, your creatures with Toxic get +1/+1 for each of their reinforcements. When you cast a creature card with Toxic, create a Phyrexian token under your opponent's control. So just a good way to get your toxin tokens going. Necrogen Rot Priest. When a creature with Toxic you can control deals combat damage to your opponent's Planeswalker, create a Phyrexian Toxin token under your opponent's control. So you're stacking more toxin on top of what you were already doing. Target creature you control with Toxic gains Death Touch and Berserker until end of turn. Vraska's Fall. Easy removal spell, but it also creates more toxins. Phyrexian Atlas is going to be not only converting gems for us, but it's also going to be giving a little bit of advantage if we're playing with Toxin. Seed Core, same thing. When you mash the support's gem, the first Phyrexian creature in your hand that can gain mana gains 6 mana. So we're giving Phyrexian to our cards in our hand with their first ability. So there you go. If your opponent controls a card named Phyrexian Toxin with 3 or more reinforcements, your first creature with base power and toughness 1/1 gets +3. So that one's not really doing a lot for us in this deck, but it's something. Vraska Betrayal Sting. Mostly using this one for the Proliferate Escalate. Draw a card and lose 3 life. Destroy target creature. Its controller creates a gold token. So kind of a mini ability of the Planeswalker. And then target creature you control gains Menace, and it gains Toxic 5. So that's really going to be ramping up the production of those Toxin tokens. Cryptics. Already talked about why this is a good card, but converting 5 gems to black, basically. Urgent Necropsy. So this is one that I've been using a lot, and it was an exclusive card that they gave us, so thanks for that, Webcore. Destroy the first opposing creature. Collect evidence 2. If evidence was collected, destroy all opposing cards. So we have a few different cards that are creating clue tokens, so that's what we're going to be collecting evidence with. So this will help out a lot if you're in a bind, but you happen to have some clue tokens going on the board. And then Flotsam is a card that will be creating clue tokens for us. Destroy the top 4 cards of your library, then create 3 clue tokens. Then the backside, Jetsam, destroy the top 4 cards of each player's library, then Pick one of the first two different spells from your opponent's graveyard. If you do, fetch that card and it gains 5 mana. So in my playtesting, I don't really get to choose the spells that I get from my opponent. It just gives me whatever one is next in their graveyard. I don't know. That might be a bug, or maybe there's just not enough spells in my opponent's graveyard when I cast this most of the time. But either way, there's a lot of cool synergy happening, and it's always fun when it seems like you're kind of losing the match, and then all of a sudden your opponent just dies due to the toxin. So very fun deck to mess around with. And if you haven't used toxin in a while, give it a shot, and hope you enjoy this showcase. So the final deck that I want to showcase here is a pretty fun one, and I have to include this battle here because it's against, oh my god, puppies. So if you're a fan of Nerd Thuggery's podcast, you know exactly why that's a special battle here to showcase. So this deck is all built around using your opponent's cards against them. So the two main cards that are going to be doing that for us are Shieldred and the Cruelty of Gix. If you haven't used this card in a while, it's a fun one. Your opponent discards the first creature or Vanguard card from their hand. Pick one of the first 4 cards from your library, fetch that card, and you lose 6 life. Move the first creature or Vanguard from target graveyard to play under your control. So if you want to adjust this a bit and put some cards that proliferate and escalate into it, then you're going to be getting more stuff from that third chapter of the saga. Coffin Queen is an interesting one from Black PMA. When this support enters the board, pick one of the first 4 creatures from target graveyard, move that card to play under your control with its reinforcements, and it gains haste. You want creatures with haste to hit the battlefield to take advantage of that first ability, giving them First Strike and Death Touch. Tyvar Jubilant Brawler is also in there, and so you can also bring that Vanguard back into play with the Cruelty of Gix. Leyline of the Guild Pack is my only gem converter here, so you could, if you want to, just change one of these cases out for more gem conversion if you're a little bit scared of that. But either way, when this support enters the board, convert 3 gems to your Planeswalker's color, so that's nice. You're getting a little bit of gem conversion there. To solve, if you control cards with all the colors, card gains the solved emblem at the beginning of combat on your turn. Target creature gains flying, double strike, and haste until end of turn. So that's going to be helping you do more damage with this card, especially if Leyline of the Guild Pact is down. Case of the Gorgon's Kiss. So this is a fun little card. When this support enters the board, destroy an opposing creature card with the greatest mana value. To solve, if 3 or more creatures entered in a graveyard this turn, this card gains the solved emblem. So that's going to be easy to do with Breach the Multiverse. And if it's solved at the end of your turn, create a Gorgon token. So the Gorgon token is actually not too bad. It's a 4/4 token with Death Touch and Lifelink. So it's going to be growing in a way that Thopter's Spy Network does, except the advantage that Thopters do is that it happens at the beginning of your turn. But still, these growing every turn and getting Lifelink, it's pretty nice, and it's something that will eat up creature removal on your opponent's side because it's going to be bringing a new creature into play every turn that your opponent will have to deal with. Shieldred, if you remember, we're destroying first opposing non-token creature, and we're going to be getting all the sagas, and then of course the third saga is the most important one. Move all creature and support cards from all graveyards into play. Under your control, return the first card named Shieldred from your exile to the battlefield under your control. So you're going to be getting this card back, and it's going to keep the cycle going. Breach the Multiverse is destroying the top 10 cards of each player's library. So with their third ability, you're going to be bringing these out. You know, even if they don't get all their reinforcements, it's fine. As long as you get them from your opponent, it's pretty good. So this really only works very well if your opponent is running a heavy creature deck. But, you know, with the whole thing of everybody running Galta Tortoise Atraxa, aka GTA, you're probably going to be fighting some nasty creatures, and she does a pretty good job of turning that around and using it against them. Infinite obliteration and everything else is just in here to help to get things going. So urgent necropsy, you can change that out for a card with a little bit more utility. So you may want to use something like if you want to go on a cheaper route, you could do Void Rend, Shieldred's Edict, destroying opposing creatures, and then of course Invoke Despair is also a great one. So I think if you're playing this Planeswalker mostly for fun, this is one of the best decks to do that with. All right, well, it's everyone's favorite time of the video. It is time to give out grades. So we got first to start with here, maximum HP, A+. Pretty good, especially for a monocolored walker, which I feel like don't always have the best HP max, but very solid here. Mana spread. Okay, well, I already talked a little bit about this, but for me, when it comes to having, especially a mono planeswalker, I think the best spread is having the main monocolor be really high and then two other supplements that are, mid value. For example, a Johnny, Invigorate Leadership, I think he's the S plus mana spread because he's got +7 on his color and then +3 on two other colors. So she has only +1 on two other colors, so it's a little bit flat in that way. So she gets a B for me. I mean, if you build for getting a lot of black conversion, then great. But if you don't have anything converting black, you can really stall out with her. Ability 1. So there are a couple things that I wish were a little bit better for her, especially when you give the Phyrexian creatures First Strike and Death Touch. I wish it lasted more than just that first turn, or it gave creatures haste, because a lot of times you won't be able to take advantage of that unless you're using creatures that have Defender or Reach or something like that on it, something that can make them block. So other than that, I do love the drawing 4 cards, so it gets a B+. Second ability, I mean, it's pretty straightforward. Destroy target creature, get 6 gold tokens out of it. What more do you want? So that's an A+ ability to me. Ability 3, so this one is definitely the most complicated one of her abilities and kind of what her kit sort of hinges on, especially when you combine it with her passive ability. So it's a lot of fun, though it is very dependent on what your opponent is playing. So I gotta knock it a little bit for that. Depending on where you're at, if you're in Platinum and you're facing, a lot of Vindicators and Atraxas and everything else that can be pretty nasty, this ability is really as good as the opponents you're facing. So it gets a B+ for me. Her passive ability, it's interesting. It definitely does some very unique things that can be built around. There are a lot of cards in today's standard with the whole Dominaria saga that we just went through, and it gives us a lot of things to play with when it comes to Phyrexians. Once that rotates out of standard, maybe she won't be as inherently synergistic with the cards in play, but she at least gives her creatures an ability to synergize. So her passive ability gets a B+ for me. Her versatility. Her versatility is pretty decent. I do feel like she runs a lot off of creatures. If you're not playing creatures and your opponent isn't playing creatures, then her kit doesn't really do a lot for you, but those times are few and far between. You can still do a lot if you put creatures into your deck. You can synergize a lot there with her abilities. She is very creature focused, though, and so her versatility for me is a B-. Card utility. This kind of comes back a little bit to what I was saying about mana spread. I feel like you do have to dedicate at least I feel like you do have to dedicate at least some of your deck to gem conversion to get her going. Without it, I feel like you're going to stall out on casting your cards. So in that regard, she does fall short a little bit for me, but she does work well with not only your creatures, but your opponent. So she can utilize a lot of cards that steal from your opponent. And so it makes her kind of interesting in that way. So she gets a B- on card utility there. And then fun. It really depends on what you like in this game. There are a lot of players who love to use their opponent's deck against them. I call those people vindictive. But she does excel at those sort of things. There are a lot of cards that will help that along. If you skip to the end of this video just to see my grades, I encourage you to watch at least that part of this video. And yeah, I found her to be pretty fun to play with. So she gets an A- for me there. The fun can sometimes diminish a little bit when you don't have those black gems to swap into and you're stuck trying to get some good mana going. But I do find her pretty unique and interesting to play with in that regard. So my final grade for her, she gets a B+. Pretty solid. Not quite A tier for me. There's just a few little things that bump her down a little bit. But yeah, if you like mono-colored black walkers, I feel like I barely scratched the surface of a lot of her potential. So this grade can maybe be bumped up a little bit. But I want to see what other people come up with for her. When she hits the vault, there'll probably be a decent amount of people who want to give her a try. If you're just looking at her abilities and stuff and we're a little bit underwhelmed, I don't know. If you're a person who likes to collect all the planeswalkers and give them all a fair shake, she's definitely going to be higher up there for you than you might think at first glance. So definitely worth giving a shot to her. Yeah, that's going to do it for me. Thank you, Webcore, again for not only letting me test this Planeswalker, but also continuously giving us some Planeswalkers that are interesting and maybe they're not as amazing at first glance as people might think. But I've been impressed with the depth of the Planeswalkers when you really get into them. So kudos on the design for these Planeswalkers, and I cannot wait to see what comes next from the team. So if you guys are interested in some of my other Planeswalker reviews, make sure to check out the playlist at the end of this video. All right, see you next time.